See that blue fella there? He's gotten around in his days. I mean, after 30 years of being on a drip, if your body is still making it through mediocrity, after a glimmer of hope after Shadow the Hedgehog on PS2, congratulations, you outlasted the French Revolution. It wasn't always, like, just this though. Go back to the 90s and Sega was putting out a platformer for every finger on a hand and publishing just as many for the other, and yet everybody still attributes the company's entire decade to the same 5 titles. Oh yeah, I'm a huge 90s Sega fan. I bought the Sonic CD 2011 re-release. I was supporting the cause! I've always known these franchises existed, but I've just never got around to playing them, mainly because I'm a zoomer and Sega stopped making consoles before I was even born, but I suppose I could always emulate. It was a business expense. This here is Alex Kidd in Miracle World, the first game to star one Alex Kidd, whose popularity peaked in 1996. Coincidentally, that's also the game's copyright date. His franchise lasted across 5 Master System titles and 1 on the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if you're an American, with the final installment launching in 1990 on the Sega Master System, 1 year before Sonic the Hedgehog debuts. What I'm getting at is, Alex Kidd was essentially Sega's mascot in the 80s, before, you know, that other thing happened. And I'll be honest, I can see why they replaced him. Let's get the good out of the way first. As an 8-bit title, this looks exceedingly pretty. Terrain tiles get a bit repetitive at times, but character sprites are so detailed and full of colour and oddly intricate. Take this octopus, it uses various individual sprites to make up an entire tentacle and have it appear so curved yet move so smoothly, and that's just so cool for a console title in 1986. The soundtrack only consists of 3 themes, with the main one being a 20-second loop, so at least the French Revolution outlasted something. The underwater theme and castle themes are fully length bangers though, plus there's unique music when using vehicles. Totally optional and unnecessary side vehicles, but there are vehicles nonetheless. Anyway, let's not skip ahead too far because you can't use those in the first level, and what a first level this is. It's just blind jumps. Directionless, constant, blind jumps. The game is mostly merciful with this at least. It kind of guides you down a safe path, but there's basically no difficulty to it, which is fine for a first level, but it doesn't really feel like there's any experience to get here. The whole challenge is to safely get down to each progressive platform, but you've already done that by the time you've seen what the platform is. No other level in the game even features a downward on foot climb, so I'm just really confused as to why they introduced a platformer on a level that actively discourages jumping with tight spaces and going in the exact opposite direction jumping propels you. So what can the kid do? Well, there's a jump button and a 1-frame punch, calm down Bruce Lee. His jump is abnormally high and offers a lot of air control, which sounds good on paper but feels cheap in practice. There's no build-up of momentum, you're either static or at full speed, which you can achieve while airborne without any prior movement, and what? Combined with the game's lust for low ceilings and every other stage being structured like a hoarder's home and one-hit deaths, this level design's kinda crap. I'm constantly finding myself stuck under these blocks too. They're breakable, but not from below, and collision against overhead terrain is just bad. In fact, so is the collision when trying to collect items for that matter. The CDI games have better collision detection, and that's just sad. Speaking of breakable blocks, there's quite a few scattered around the world that give you items. That mostly consists of money, but there's also this mystery box thing that... what did that do? Yeah, okay, that's fair. It's not like I literally walked straight through it once already. Once you plummet to the bottom of the gulag, you move onto a water section and it just doesn't stop. While in water, Alex Kidd will continuously float up, and here's a me problem. So I'm trying to gently hold down on the Joy-Con in an attempt to counteract this while not completely sinking, forgetting this game was designed for binary movement on a D-pad and there's no analog control, meaning it's either forcibly float or volunteer to sink like the Titanic. All of this is for one single rice ball, by the way. Probably a good time to mention it. I can see why Sega dropped you in your absolutely ambitious adventures, you prick. Speaking of ambitiousness, the next level takes place in one-dimensional space. There's a shop at the start, but I accidentally opened the pause menu, panicked to close it, and unintentionally equipped a power-up, so I didn't even bother going in, honestly. I'll tell you what too, that power-up turned the game from mildly irritating to absurdly easy. All you have to do is hold right, jump and punch a ton and the level completes itself. It's literally just a straight line. Literally just a straight line. Make it to the end though and we get to see the game's first boss. Stationary. It's rock, paper, scissors with an AI, it's just luck on whether you win or not. What? Who lost? Clearly I won, right? I have rock and that typically beats scissors in the clock rule set, but the text says I lose. But maybe that was the boss talking since he explained the rules, but then why would the I lose text be over Alex's name and how come? Whoa. That's rude. Once you defeat iRock, he combusts and turns into a pensioner who lets you move on to the next level. Neat! You lose your power-up at the beginning of this stage, but I didn't really need it. It was pretty easy, I won't lie. Swim a bit, grab rice, walk a bit, fight a bull, enter a cave, beat up a cabbage. Then take a break, you deserve it. Hey, there might not be much going on so far, but at least there's no hazards that blend in with the background. Well, that's interesting. You actually need to use a mid-air punch to complete the level. Ouch. Alright, that one was just to set up the RNG manipulation. If I go now... yeah, okay. Ooh, I did it! Look, I don't want to admit how many attempts this took, so I get this instead. There's an actual boss at the end of the level, and I thought you'd actually have to time your attack to avoid the sword, but nope! Turns out the boss withdraws it as long as you get near him. It's okay, it's just an illusion of challenge. Ha 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 ha. What? After the forest, you have to cross what feels like an entire country on yet another straight line mission, and then you get to this castle, finally uniqueness. Rather than having a seamless scroll, each room of the castle is basically its own little arena full of enemies and puzzles. Some have fun and unique set pieces like actual medieval traps, and others are just There seemed to be a bunch of alternative routes too, but they all led to dead ends. One room just had some kid in a prison cell who never appears again. What are you trying to get at here, Sega? Hey, guess what god's the cow? Oh god, it moves. Sega put more girth into the bosses from here on, making their heads detach and fly around once you defeat them with gang signs. And then from here on, subsequent levels are tiny. It takes a matter of seconds to start off the level and get to the boss, play a game of rock, paper, scissors, then fight their head to complete the level. There's also one level that only exists to give you dialogue from a character that only ever appears here, and like, am I meant to care? I want to be immersed, but there's no context giving me a reason to care. Right before the final level is the first and only mandatory vehicle section in the game, which I enjoyed, but my standards sort of plummet during this very moment, so I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about things objectively anymore. There are actually a few levels where you start in a helicopter or motorboat, but I always break it a few seconds in and then the game shifts to an underwater level. It's kind of clever to lay out levels like this when only one axis can scroll at a time. It does a good job of making the world feel more connected than it is and convincing me the game has worth. Alright, time for the final castle. I'm expecting this one to be full of tricks and japes, so I better be careful. Damn it. We again scroll through room by room by room, although this crib's a lot less puzzly and maze-centric than the last, focusing a lot more on action. There's speed segments, water segments, platforming segments, utter crap. I hate this. I already explained my gripes with how water controls in this game. Why did they make pixel-precise swimming? And then there's the final boss. All it does is shoot spikes that fly in the exact same pattern every time, and you can avoid it by standing right next to the boss. It's like the spring from Donkey Kong, but without an ounce of fret. What? There's another level? Right, so to finish the game, you need to swim down to find some sort of chamber vault thing. I don't care anymore. From said vault, you have to jump down on these tiles in a very specific order to complete the game, and if you mess up, death will spawn, obviously. There's not a single hint to the order you have to hit these tiles, so I have no shame in doing this. I use save states. 3 minutes later, I finally completed it, and all that was left was a bit of unnecessary, needlessly tight, yet deceptively simple platforming, and the game was over. Do I feel I've accomplished anything? No. Honestly, I think this game is objectively bad. The final level? Great! The rest of it, not so much. Level design essentially boiled down to random floating blocks, bosses were pure luck, and that one-hit death system was honestly pretty infuriating. That doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it though. Despite my whining, I had fun, and that's all that matters, right? Surely. I wouldn't recommend paying to play this when there's plenty of other, more worthwhile games from the decade to experience, but if you got the opportunity to experience this for free, go for it. SEGA actually commissioned the game to get remade in 2021. Looking at screenshots, the level design seems to be basically identical, so I'm scared to see how that turned out, but at least I gave Alex Kidd another shot. It's not surprising he didn't make it into this century to begin with though. His franchise is always a bit of a mess, to be honest. His other titles all featured different gameplay from the original, so it was kind of doomed from the start. Sega never really knew what to do with it in the first place. The only game keeping the same style was its direct sequel, which released 3 years later on the Sega Mega Drive. So this is what being a capitalist feels like. Right, let's get this out of the way quickly. Firstly, the game looks arguably worse than the previous installment, which came out on weaker hardware, although there are more level themes this time, so that kinda makes up for that at least. Kinda. Alex Kidd can become a quadruped while avoiding cars now, so move over, Frogger. Those floating blocks slide through the air rather than immediately getting destroyed on impact, which crushes enemies against walls this time around. Also, some levels actually scroll on both axes now at once, and yes, the bosses are exactly the same. Oh, come on, they removed the gang signs.